Marcus Chen wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform for the fifth time in as many minutes. The young xenoanthropologist had spent years studying alien cultures, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. Standing at 5'8", he felt particularly small as he watched the 8-foot-tall Vrachnid female stride toward him through the diplomatic ship's corridor. "Congratulations, Shen." Captain Rodriguez slapped him on the back, far too cheerfully for someone who was about to hand over a crew member to a species that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a supermodel. "You've been selected." "Selected for what exactly?" Marcus's voice cracked. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the approaching alien. Her exoskeleton shimmered with iridescent blues and greens, and her movements were unnervingly graceful for something so large. The Vrachnid stopped in front of them, her antennae twitching as she studied Marcus. He tried not to think about all those Earth documentaries about female mantises and their mating habits, the ones that ended with the male being eaten. "This is Cathixa," the captain said, still grinning. "She's very interested in working with you." Cathixa's mandibles clicked in what might have been a greeting, or maybe she was discussing sauce options. Marcus couldn't tell. "Working with me," Marcus squeaked. "Don't you mean working on me?" The translator device on Cathixa's thorax crackled to life. "You will come with me," she announced. Her translated voice was deep and melodious, but that didn't make her words any less terrifying. Marcus looked desperately at his superior officers. They all wore the same encouraging smiles, like they were sending him off to summer camp instead of potentially to his doom. But, Marcus stammered, "Shouldn't we discuss terms? Or maybe have a cultural exchange briefing first?" Catixa's head tilted at an angle that made Marcus's neck hurt just looking at it. "No need. I have studied your species extensively. I know exactly what to do with you." That did not help. Not at all. "Pack your bags, Chen," Captain Rodriguez said. "You'll be living on their ship for the next 6 months." Marcus felt his knees go weak. 6 months. But what if what if they? "This is a tremendous honor," Commander Park chimed in. "You're the first human they've ever chosen. Think of the diplomatic implications." "I'm thinking more about the digestive implications," Marcus muttered. Catix stepped closer, looming over him. Her compound eyes reflected Marcus's pale face back at him 1,000 times. "You are perfect," she declared. "So small, so delicate." Marcus swallowed hard. Was it his imagination, or did her mandibles just make a smacking sound? "The captain has already approved the transfer," Cathixa continued. "We begin tomorrow at first meal." First meal. There it was. Marcus shot an accusatory look at his superior officers, who were still beaming like they'd just won him a prize, instead of potentially sentencing him to death by alien digestion. "Don't worry," Captain Rodriguez whispered as Cathixa turned to leave. "This is going to be great for your career." "I need to have a career left to advance in," Marcus hissed back. But it was too late. The paperwork was signed, and tomorrow he would be boarding a Vrachnid ship with an 8-foot-tall alien female who kept looking at him like he was the answer to all her prayers, or perhaps all her cravings. As Marcus trudged back to his quarters to pack, he couldn't help but wonder if he should write his will. Then again, maybe he should write a cookbook instead. At least then someone might learn from his final recipe. Xenoanthropologist's surprise. The worst part, his superior officers seemed to find the whole thing hilarious. Marcus had a sinking feeling that humanity's first major diplomatic mission with the Vrachnids was going to be a lot more interesting than anyone had bargained for, and he was going to be the main course of action. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of what he now realized was an enormous kitchen. His mouth hung open as he watched Cathixa gracefully move between several cooking stations, her long limbs expertly managing multiple tasks at once. Come in," she clicked excitedly through her translator. "Today we begin your tenderizing." Marcus took one terrified step backward. "My. What? No, wrong word." Cathixa's antennae twitched in frustration as she adjusted her translator. Your teaching. Yes, that's the word. Today we begin your teaching. Marcus wasn't sure if that made him feel any better. The massive kitchen was filled with tools he didn't recognize, and some of them looked suspiciously like torture devices. A large pot of something purple was bubbling ominously on what he assumed was a stove. "I am Vrachnid's most celebrated chef," Kfixa announced proudly, picking up what appeared to be a vegetable and dicing it with terrifying speed. "And you, small human, will be my first non-Vrachnid apprentice." Marcus blinked. "Chef, you mean you're not going to eat me?" Kfixa's mandibles clattered in what he would later learn was Vrachnid laughter. "Eat you? Oh no. We Vrachnids are vegetarians." Although, she leaned down to peer at him closely. "You do look quite tender, like a small, scared root vegetable." Relief flooded through Marcus so fast he had to lean against the wall. "So when Captain Rodriguez said this would be good for my career, he meant cooking career." Kfixa flourished all four of her arms. "Humans have such fascinating taste buds. And your tiny hands." She grabbed one of his hands with her much larger one, making Marcus yell. "Perfect for detailed garnish work." Still processing this turn of events, Marcus watched as Kfixa pulled out various ingredients from storage units. But why all the secrecy? Why didn't anyone tell me? Ah. Kfixa's antennae drooped slightly. That was probably because of the incident with our last cultural exchange attempt. The human diplomat screamed and fainted when we tried to show him our garden. Very embarrassing. Marcus remembered his own near-panic attack and felt a wave of sympathy for both sides. "I guess we do tend to judge based on appearances. On Earth, we have insects called praying mantises that, Yes, we know about Earth mantises." Kfixa waved dismissively with two arms while chopping with the other two. "Always with the eating of mates. So barbaric. We Vrachnids prefer to eat 4-course meals with proper utensils." She handed Marcus what looked like a cross between an apron and a suit of armor. "Now put this on. Safety first. Some of our spices can be quite explosive." "Explosive?" Marcus squeaked, clutching the apron. "Only mildly. Nothing a quick dunk in the neutralizing bath won't fix." She patted a vat of blue liquid with one of her free hands. "Now let me teach you the Vrachnid word for delicious. It sounds very similar to your word for help. So do try to get it right. We don't want another incident like the great misunderstanding of last year." As Marcus struggled into his safety apron, he couldn't help but ask, "What happened last year?" "Oh, a simple translation error. A Vrachnid asked for cooking assistance and instead got a military rescue team. Quite awkward explaining why we needed armed forces to help frost a cake." She clicked in amusement. "Now shall we begin with knife skills? Don't worry about the size of the blades. They're much less dangerous than they look." Marcus stared at the knife rack, where the smallest blade was as long as his arm. He had a feeling this apprenticeship was going to be just as terrifying as he'd originally feared, just in a completely different way. No, small human. You must stroke the vrac leaf gently, like you're petting a sleeping kitten." Fixa's mandibles clicked in distress as she watched Marcus roughly chop the iridescent blue leaves. They release their flavors only when they feel safe. Marcus stared at the pile of leaves on his cutting board. After 3 days in Kfixa's kitchen, he was still trying to wrap his head around Vrachnid cooking philosophy. The vegetables have feelings. Of course they do. Kfixa gracefully demonstrated with her own leaf, running one finger along its spine. The leaf shimmered and released a sweet aroma. "See, happy leaf, better flavor." Marcus tried again, this time treating the leaf like it might break. To his surprise, it glowed softly and released a scent like honey and strawberries. It worked. Good. Kfixa clapped all 4 hands, making a sound like a small applause. "Now you're learning. This is why we Vrachnids look so fierce. We must protect our garden worlds. Only through peace and gentleness do we create the best flavors." Just then, a loud bang echoed through the kitchen. Marcus jumped, but Cathixa just sighed. Ah, the boon bowls are ripe. She reached into a nearby cabinet with 2 arms while her other 2 continued cooking. Here, put these on. She handed Marcus what looked like earmuffs. He put them on just as another explosion rocked the kitchen. What exactly are boon bowls? He asked, watching as Cathixa calmly walked to their garden viewing window. They're like your earth potatoes, but they release their seeds through small explosions. Very nutritious, although we did have to redesign our entire greenhouse with blast-proof glass. She pointed to a patch of plants that were periodically popping like firecrackers. The explosions tenderized themselves. Very efficient. Marcus made a mental note to be extra careful around the root vegetable section. He was starting to understand why his protective apron was made of the same material as spacecraft hulls. Now, Cathixa continued, returning to their cooking station. Let me show you how we harvest singing spinach. Cover your ears if the high notes bother you. Last week, one particularly talented bunch shattered 3 crystalline serving dishes. As if on cue, a high-pitched melody began emanating from another section of the garden. Marcus watched in amazement as a patch of purple leaves swayed and hummed in perfect harmony. But why do they sing? He asked. To attract pollinators, of course. Cathixa explained while expertly filleting what looked like a musical cucumber. On our world, the best pollinators have excellent musical taste. Natural selection at its finest. Marcus nodded, pretending this made perfect sense. He was beginning to realize that Vracnid cooking was part culinary art, part wildlife management, and part concert conducting. Oh. Fix suddenly straightened up to her full 8-foot height. I almost forgot. Today we're also harvesting the dancing mushrooms. Quick, put on your anti-gravity boots. My what? Marcus looked down at his regular shoes in alarm. The mushrooms only release their spores while dancing, and they prefer partners who can float, Cathixa explained, already strapping on her own boots. Don't worry if you can't follow all the steps. They're very forgiving teachers. Just try not to step on their toes. They get quite pouty. As Marcus watched his alien mentor gracefully float toward the mushroom section, he couldn't help but smile. A week ago, he'd been terrified of being eaten. Now he was about to dance with mushrooms, while explosive potatoes provided the percussion, and singing spinach handled the vocals. Coming, small human. Fixa called, already doing what looked like an aerial waltz with a sparkly orange mushroom. The tango section is about to begin. Marcus strapped on his anti-gravity boots. If someone had told him xenanthropology would involve zero-gravity fungal dancing, he would have studied a lot harder in his movement classes. Marcus stared at the enormous competition hall, his heart pounding. Hundreds of 8-foot-tall vracnids moved around preparing their cooking stations, their iridescent exoskeletons creating a dazzling light show under the bright stadium lights. Fixa, he whispered, tugging on his mentor's apron. I'm the only human here. Of course you are. Fixa beamed, her antennae wiggling with pride. You're the first non-vracnid ever to compete in the Grand Culinary Championship. Isn't it exciting? Exciting isn't exactly the word I'd use, Marcus muttered, watching a particularly large vracnid chef snap a thick cooking table in half with one hand to adjust its height. From the judge's platform, an elderly vracnid with silver-tinted exoskeleton stood up. This is outrageous. He clicked loudly, pointing at Marcus. The competition is for vracnid chefs only. It's been that way for 3,000 years. Actually, Chief Judge Bikrat, Fixa stepped forward, all 4 arms crossed. The rules only state that competitors must be trained by a certified vracnid chef. They say nothing about species. The crowd buzzed with excited chittering. Marcus wished he could make himself even smaller than he already was compared to them. But, Bikrat sputtered, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. How can he even reach the cooking surface? Fixa smiled and pulled out a collapsible stepping platform. We've made adaptations. Just then, another competitor knocked over a massive pot of bubbling liquid. Without thinking, Marcus dove between two cooking stations, rolled under a table, and emerged on the other side to catch a falling rack of precious singing spinach before it hit the ground. His small size and quick movements had allowed him to reach it before any of the larger arachnids could react. The hall went silent. "Did you see that?" Someone whispered. "Such agility. He moved through spaces we can't even fit in." And his hands, they're so perfect for detailed garnish work. Vukrat's antennae drooped slightly. "Fine," he grumbled. "He can compete, but he must follow all traditional rules." "Thank you, honored judge." Fixa bowed, then turned to Marcus. "Ready, small human." Marcus looked at his cooking station, modified to accommodate his height. "What exactly am I cooking?" "Only the most challenging dish in arachnid cuisine," Fixa said cheerfully. "The Harmony Feast." "The what?" "You must coordinate the boom bowls to explode in rhythm with the singing spinach, while the dancing mushrooms perform a ballet, all while creating a 7-course meal that tells a story of seasonal change on our homeworld." She patted his head with one of her hands. "No pressure." Marcus took a deep breath. He looked around at the skeptical faces of the other competitors, then at Cathix's encouraging smile. Over the past weeks, he'd learned that arachnid cooking was about more than just food. It was about creating an experience that engaged all the senses. "All right," he said, straightening his safety apron. "But I'm doing this my way." He pulled out his secret weapon, a tiny earth spice kit Cathixa had helped him modify for arachnid ingredients. The other competitors watched in fascination as he began to work, his small hands moving with precision that their larger limbs couldn't match. "And remember," Cathixa whispered as the competition began, "if the boom bowls go off rhythm, just improvise. Think of it as unexpected percussion." Marcus nodded, already focused on coordinating his vegetables' musical performance while prepping his first course. He might be small, but he was about to show them that sometimes the best things came in human-sized packages. The competition was in full swing, and Marcus was sweating. Around him, arachnid chefs moved like well-choreographed dancers, their 4 arms working in perfect harmony. But something wasn't right with his dish. "Fixa," he called to his mentor, who was watching from the sidelines. "There's a problem with the glow garlic." Fixa rushed over, her antennae twitching with concern. "What's wrong?" "I can taste something hot in it, something the other competitors aren't noticing." Marcus held up the luminous clove that pulsed with a soft blue light. Fixa took a bite and shrugged all 4 shoulders. "Tastes normal to me. Perfect texture, ideal luminosity." Then it hit Marcus. "Wait a minute, can arachnids taste bitter flavors?" "Bitter?" Fix's head tilted in confusion. "What is bitter?" Marcus's eyes widened. "Quick, try this earth coffee I brought." He pulled out a small thermos from his ingredient bag. Fixa took a sip and blinked her compound eyes. "It has a fascinating texture, but the flavor is very mild. Like warm water." "That's it." Marcus snapped his fingers. "Arachnids can't taste certain flavors that humans can, and humans can't detect some of the texture variations you can." He grabbed a piece of the glow garlic. "This batch is slightly bitter, which would clash with the singing spinach's sweet notes, but only humans would notice." The nearby competitors had stopped to listen, their antennae all pointed in Marcus's direction. "Are you saying," one of them clicked excitedly, "that humans have different taste abilities?" "Yes." Marcus was getting excited now. "Fixa, remember how you said my mushroom dance last week felt incomplete but tasted perfect? It's because I was matching flavors but missing subtle texture changes I couldn't feel." Fix's mandibles spread in what Marcus now recognized as a huge smile. "And when I said your boom bowl timing was perfect, but the taste was slightly off. You were feeling texture combinations I couldn't detect." Marcus finished. "We're not better or worse at cooking. We're different. Together, we could create dishes that are perfect in both flavor and texture." The competition hall was buzzing now. Judge Vikrat leaned forward on his platform, all his eyes focused on Marcus. "Young human," he clicked thoughtfully, "are you suggesting that your species' different sensory abilities could enhance our traditional cuisine?" "Exactly." Marcus grabbed various ingredients. "Look, if I combine the glow garlic with earth basil, and then coordinate their light pulses with the dancing mushrooms." He worked quickly, his small hands moving with precision. The dish began to glow in a complex pattern, while the mushrooms danced in perfect sync. Marcus added a pinch of earth spices, making Cathixa gasp. "The texture, it's incredible, but how did you balance it so perfectly?" "I couldn't." Marcus grinned. "I focused on the flavors I could taste, and trusted your training about textures. It only works because we work together." Judge Vikrat floated down from his platform and tasted Marcus's creation. His antennae shot straight up. This is unprecedented. The fusion of human and Vracnid sensory abilities has created something entirely new." He turned to the crowd. "This is why we must remain open to new perspectives." The other competitors crowded around, eager to learn about human taste abilities. Marcus found himself surrounded by curious 8-foot-tall chefs, all asking about earth spices and human flavor perception. Fixa beamed proudly. "See, I knew choosing you was right, though you did look quite nervous when you thought I was going to eat you." Marcus laughed, showing a group of fascinated Vracnids how to use chopsticks. "Well, now we're creating feasts together instead. Much better than being one." Marcus knew something was wrong when Cathixa came into the kitchen looking more agitated than he'd ever seen her. All 4 of her hands were wringing nervously, and her antennae were doing the twitchy dance he'd learned meant serious trouble. "Small human," she clicked softly, "we have a problem." "Did the boom bowls explode in the storage room again?" Marcus asked, looking up from where he was teaching 3 young Vracnid students how to properly hold human-sized garnishing tools. "Worse. The Grand Council is coming. Today." Fix's mandibles clacked anxiously. "They want to see this human cooking school for themselves." Marcus dropped his spoon. In the 3 weeks since the competition, their cooking school had become incredibly popular. Vracnid chefs from all over the system had come to learn about human flavors and techniques. But the Grand Council, that was different. "Isn't that good news?" he asked hopefully. "More support for human Vracnid cooperation." "Not exactly," Cathixa sighed. "Some council members think we're corrupting traditional Vracnid cuisine. They say mixing human elements with our sacred recipes is disrespectful." Just then, Captain Rodriguez burst into the kitchen, looking worried. "Marcus, we've got Earth diplomats incoming too. They heard about your cooking school and they're concerned." "Concerned about what?" Marcus asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew. "They think sharing human cooking secrets might give the Vracnids too much of an advantage in future trade negotiations." The captain ran his hand through his hair. "Something about protecting Earth's culinary interests." Marcus looked around their kitchen classroom. Young Vracnids were using human-sized tools to practice detailed garnish work. Human students were learning to feel subtle texture variations in vibrating vegetables. Everyone was working together, learning, growing. "This is ridiculous," he declared. "Cathixa, remember what you taught me about the Harmony Feast?" She nodded. "Every ingredient must play its part, but none should overpower the others." "Exactly. And what happens when the boom bowls try to explode louder than the singing spinach?" "The whole dish falls apart," Cathixa clicked, her antennae perking up as she caught on. "The beauty comes from cooperation, not competition." Marcus grinned. "So let's show them. Captain, when are the diplomats arriving?" "Both groups will be here in 2 hours." "Perfect." Marcus clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "Okay, students. Pop quiz time. We're going to prepare a diplomatic feast that proves why human Vracnid cooperation makes everything better." The kitchen burst into excited activity. Human students paired up with Vracnid partners, combining their different sensory abilities to create perfect dishes. Thixa coordinated the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra. But Marcus, she clicked quietly while checking the students' dancing mushroom routine. What if they don't understand? Marcus smiled, remembering his own first terrified days in her kitchen. They'll understand. You know why? Why? Because food doesn't care about politics. When something tastes good, it just tastes good. He demonstrated a new garnishing technique to a fascinated Vracnid student. And when they taste what we can create together, they'll have to admit that cooperation is better than competition. Thixa finished, her mandibles spreading in a wide smile. As they prepared for the diplomatic delegation's arrival, Marcus couldn't help but laugh at the irony. A month ago, he thought an 8-foot alien was going to eat him. Now they were about to serve a feast that might just change the future of human-Vracnid relations. Besides, he added, watching his students work together seamlessly, have you ever tried to make a boom bulb explode in rhythm while also conducting singing spinach? Trust me, that takes teamwork. The diplomatic dining hall buzzed with tension. On one side sat 5 stern-faced human officials in crisp uniforms. On the other, 7 enormous Vracnid council members shimmered in their ceremonial exoskeletons. In the middle, Marcus and Thixa exchanged nervous glances. Ready? Thixa whispered, her antennae twitching. As ready as I'll ever be, Marcus replied, adjusting his chef's uniform. Let's show them what cooperation tastes like. They had transformed the hall into a culinary theater. Dancing mushrooms twirled in synchronized patterns along the walls, while carefully timed boom bowls provided a gentle percussion beat. Singing spinach hummed softly in the background. Distinguished guests, Thixa announced, her translator set to maximum clarity. We present to you the Unity Feast. Marcus stepped forward. Each course combines traditional Vracnid ingredients with earth cooking techniques. We invite you to experience what our species can create together. The first course floated out on anti-gravity plates. Earth-style sushi, made with color-changing Vracnid rice and harmonizing herbs, Marcus explained. The rice changes color to indicate the perfect moment to eat each piece. The human officials looked skeptical, but as soon as they took a bite, their eyes widened. The texture. One Vracnid council member clicked in surprise. The flavor, gasped the human diplomat at the same time. Marcus and Thixa shared a small smile. Course after course followed, each one showcasing the unique strengths of both species. Human students worked alongside their Vracnid classmates, demonstrating their teamwork. Notice how the human garnishes complement the Vracnid light patterns, Thixa explained as the main course arrived. Just as our different abilities complement each other. The centerpiece was their masterwork, a harmony feast reimagined with earth influences. Dancing mushrooms performed a perfect ballet while floating in a human-inspired sauce. Boom bowls exploded in time with an earth classical music piece, creating a fusion of flavors and sound. But this is unprecedented. One of the Vracnid council members clicked. The Harmony Feast is our most sacred culinary tradition. Yes, Marcus agreed, and we've honored its spirit while adding new dimensions. Just as Thixa honored me by teaching me your traditions, instead of eating me like I first feared. This brought surprised laughter from both sides of the table. Even the stern-faced human officials cracked smiles. You thought she was going to eat you, one of them asked. Well, she is 8 feet tall and looks like a praying mantis, Marcus grinned. But instead, she taught me that appearances can be deceiving, and that the best creations come from working together. Thix's mandibles spread in a wide smile. And he taught us that small changes don't threaten traditions, they enhance them. Look. She pointed to where a young Vracnid student was showing the human diplomat how to feel the texture variations in a vibrating vegetable, while a human student taught a Vracnid council member how to use chopsticks. Besides, Marcus added, serving the final course, Earth cuisine borrowed ingredients and techniques from all over our planet. It made our food better, not worse. Why should space be any different? The final dish was a dramatic display of floating, glowing desserts that combined earth chocolate with light-emitting vracnid fruits. As the officials took their first bites, the tension in the room melted away like the chocolate in their mouths. Perhaps the head of the Vracnid Council clicked thoughtfully. "We have been too protective of our traditions." "And perhaps," added the lead human diplomat, wiping chocolate from his chin, "we've been too worried about the wrong kind of competition." Marcus and Kithixa exchanged triumphant looks. Their feast had done more than just taste good. It had shown both species that the best flavors come from working together. The diplomatic feast was going perfectly. Too perfectly, Marcus thought. In his experience, when things went this well, something usually went wrong. He didn't have to wait long to be proven right. "Marcus." Fix's voice carried across the kitchen with unusual urgency. "Come quickly." He rushed over to find her examining a batch of glowing fruits meant for the final dessert course. Her antennae were doing the emergency wiggle he'd learned to dread. "Something's wrong with the texture," she clicked, her mandibles tight with concern. "Feel this." Marcus touched the fruit. To his human senses, it seemed fine. "I don't notice anything." "Exactly." Fix's forearms gestured in agitation. "You can't taste the poison. But to Vracnid senses, the texture is all wrong. Someone has tampered with them." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Poison. Not fatal," Kithixa assured him, "but it would make all Vracnid diners violently ill. Someone is trying to sabotage the feast." They heard footsteps approaching. The serving time for dessert was near. Marcus made a split-second decision. "Quick. I'll taste test everything. My human system won't be affected by Vracnid poison." He grabbed a spoon and started sampling dishes rapidly. "But Marcus," Fixa clicked in concern, "some of these ingredients are very strong for humans." "Better an upset stomach than a diplomatic incident," he replied, already feeling his tongue go numb from the explosive spices. "You check the textures, I'll check the flavors." They worked frantically, testing every dish. Fix's superior height let her scan the whole kitchen, while Marcus's small size allowed him to dart between stations unnoticed by the waiting staff. "Here," Marcus called out, his voice slightly slurred from all the spicy samples. "The singing spinach sauce. It tastes bitter. That same flavor Vracnids can't detect." Fixa rushed over, her antennae confirming his discovery. Just then, they heard a clatter from the storage room. Marcus peeked through a crack in the door and saw a figure in kitchen staff uniform mixing something into more dishes. "Keep everyone busy," he whispered to Kithixa. "I can sneak in without being noticed." Before she could protest, Marcus slipped through the small gap in the door, a space no Vracnid could fit through. Inside, he found one of the junior chefs from a rival cooking school, preparing to contaminate more dishes. "Stop," Marcus called out, then immediately had to dodge as the saboteur spun around, wielding a ladle like a weapon. "You're ruining everything." The Vracnid chef clicked angrily. "Our traditional cuisine should stay pure." "Pure?" Marcus had to laugh, even while ducking another ladle swing. "Your most traditional dish, the Harmony Feast, is all about different ingredients working together." Fix's voice boomed from the doorway. "He's right." She had to crouch to look in, but her impressive height blocked any escape. "And you have just violated our most sacred cooking principle, respect for the ingredients and those who share them." Security arrived moments later. As they led the saboteur away, Fixa scooped Marcus up in all four arms, checking him for injuries. "You scared me, small human. Running in there alone." Being small has its advantages," Marcus grinned, then hiccuped. His face was red from all the spicy taste testing. "Though I might need some of that special Vracnid stomach medicine later." Fixa hugged him closer. "You risked getting sick to protect our feast. To protect my people." "Of course I did," Marcus said simply. "That's what partners do. Though I have to say, this isn't quite what I imagined when I thought an 8-foot alien would make me feel queasy." They looked at the kitchen full of rescued dishes, then at each other, and burst out laughing. The feast, and their friendship, had survived yet another challenge. 1 year later, Marcus stood on a floating platform to reach the podium at the grand opening of the first Interstellar Culinary Academy. Below him, rows of human and arachnid students sat together, their size difference making the audience look like a peculiar garden of varying heights. When I first met Kethixa, he began, grinning at his mentor in the front row, I thought she was going to eat me. Instead, she taught me that the best meals come from combining different ingredients, and the best friendships come from combining different perspectives. The audience laughed, humans and arachnids alike. It was a joke that never got old. Today, Marcus continued, we're not just opening a cooking school. We're starting a new tradition. One where humans learn to feel the subtle textures that arachnids can detect, and arachnids discover the flavor combinations that only humans can taste. Fixa joined him on stage, having to crouch slightly to fit under the decorative arch. And who knows? She clicked cheerfully. Maybe one day we'll discover even more species with their own unique senses to add to our culinary arts. The academy itself was a marvel of cooperative design. The kitchens had adjustable height workstations for both species. The garden domes housed earth vegetables alongside dancing mushrooms and singing spinach. There were special safety rooms for practicing with boom bowls and meditation spaces for calming nervous leaves before cooking. But most importantly, Marcus said, looking at the eager faces before him, this academy stands as proof that when we stop fearing our differences and start celebrating them, amazing things happen. He glanced at Captain Rodriguez in the audience, who was trying not to laugh. Though maybe next time we introduce our species, we should lead with "We come in peace" instead of "You've been selected." After the ceremony, Marcus and Kethixa walked through their new academy. Students were already practicing in the kitchens, human hands working on delicate garnishes, while arachnid arms handled the larger tasks. Remember when you couldn't even look at me without trembling? Kethixa teased, her antennae doing the happy dance. Remember when you called me a scared root vegetable? Marcus shot back, expertly dodging one of her playful paths. They stopped at a window overlooking the garden dome. Earth tomatoes grew alongside glowing arachnid fruits. Boom bulbs provided fertilizer through their controlled explosions. Singing spinach hummed lullabies to help the earth plants grow. We did it, Kethixa, Marcus said softly. We really did it. Did what, small human? Created something new. Something better than either of us could have made alone. He watched a human student carefully stroke a nervous leaf while a arachnid student taught proper texture sensing technique. And to think, it all started because I thought you were going to eat me. Kethixa laughed, the sound like wind chimes in the garden dome. Well, I did eat you up. With teaching. And look how well you turned out. As they walked back to the main kitchen, they passed a mural showing their first meeting. It terrified Marcus backing away from an enthusiastic Kethixa. Beside it was a photo from their diplomatic feast, both of them covered in glowing food dye and laughing. You know what, Kethixa? Marcus said, looking up at his towering friend. I'm glad you selected me. And I'm glad you stopped screaming long enough to learn. She clicked back fondly. Together, they headed to their first official class, ready to teach a new generation of chefs that the best recipes, like the best friendships, come from the most unexpected combinations.